Com a nossa equipe, nós conseguimos fazer um passeio integrando o João a toda a equipe e visitando todos os lugares.
É, meio grudado.
Coisa de fazer
Em um mundo em que as mudanças são cada vez mais rápidas e tantas vezes inesperadas, nosso desafio como educadores só aumenta. Há um ano, o Educa desenvolveu o curso O Professor na Era Digital. Desde então, o projeto já está presente em mais de 50 escolas de todo o país. Agora é o momento de dar um novo salto para realmente engajar esta geração de nativos digitais. Por isso, o Educa apresenta uma nova versão do curso, oferecendo 12 certificações para o ensino híbrido. Com estas certificações, o professor desenvolve as competências necessárias para atuar com uma diferenciada geração. Em cada certificação, o professor recebe mentoria individualizada e pode cursar as certificações na quantidade e na ordem que desejar. Participando de todas, recebe ainda uma certificação extra. O que você está esperando para entrar no século XXI? Invista em seu desenvolvimento. Um novo salto de qualidade para você e sua escola começa com o ensino híbrido. Aproveite nossos valores promocionais. Seja um professor na era digital. Saiba mais em www.iteduc.tech.
Chegou o mais novo lançamento da Matific que vai revolucionar as aulas de matemática na sua escola. Na Matific, os alunos terão uma experiência de aprendizagem imersiva baseada em jogos, para explorar novos conceitos matemáticos, praticar habilidades e se divertir. A Matific é uma solução totalmente adaptável e personalizável, se ajustando automaticamente às necessidades individuais de cada aluno.
Para ajudar o educador, nossos jogos desenvolvidos por especialistas estão alinhados à BNCC e os principais livros didáticos. E você, professor, ganha tempo para planejar as suas aulas e acompanhar o progresso dos seus alunos. Além disso, trouxemos uma ferramenta poderosa de avaliação diagnóstica para ajudar a determinar o nível de habilidade de cada aluno.
A visão da Matific é proporcionar a cada criança, em cada canto do mundo, uma experiência matemática da mais alta qualidade possível. Aqui no Brasil, são mais de 2 milhões de alunos e 5 mil escolas. Uma história construída com resultados comprovados que só uma plataforma premiada pode entregar. Vem construir o futuro com a gente.
Neo é uma plataforma de aprendizado para escolas e universidades que fornece todas as ferramentas essenciais para criar e gerenciar atividades didáticas. Com um design intuitivo, Neo transforma o aprendizado em uma experiência agradável para os alunos e permite que os professores ampliem suas atividades além das paredes da sala de aula. Os educadores podem criar aulas atraentes e adequadas ao seu estilo de ensino sem nenhum conhecimento técnico, incluir seus recursos, mídias e arquivos favoritos. O
O aluno se sente muito mais seguro quando ele sabe que tem o apoio de uma pessoa que tem um vínculo afetivo com ele, que tem um cuidado especial com ele.
Para aprender, é também preciso escutar.
Desde o primeiro dia do aluno no Band até o último, a gente está por perto.
Durante a pandemia, acho que todo mundo teve que se reinventar. E a escola também. A gente esteve o tempo todo presente para o aluno. A gente poder ouvir os alunos, poder compartilhar com eles, trocar experiências é fundamental.
O Band tem um cuidado com o bem-estar emocional do aluno que se estende de ponta a ponta. Então, desde a chegada até o auxílio dado pelos orientadores, pelos professores, pelos funcionários.
A escuta é um recurso fundamental. É através da escuta que eu garanto o meu lugar de fala, o meu lugar de identidade e onde eu vou me conhecendo, me encontrando e encontrando o caminho.
Estar ao lado dos alunos nesse momento da primeira decisão profissional é algo que os ajuda em todo o futuro deles.
O aluno que tem esse sonho, de estudar numa universidade fora do Brasil, é um processo de muitas incertezas, muitas ansiedades. Então, esse aluno, a gente tenta ao máximo ajudar.
Um ponto muito forte é o auxílio que é dado de aluno para aluno. Então, a gente tem grupos de alunos que são voluntários e que se formam para prestar essa ajuda, essa escuta e esse acolhimento.
É muito gratificante ver que muitas das estratégias que eles aprendem aqui dentro, eles levam para fora da escola.
O bem-estar emocional é o caminho mais seguro para o sucesso e para a felicidade.
Participar da Educa Week é expandir os horizontes e você pode ampliar ainda mais esta aprendizagem. Adquira os e-books da coleção Educa Week, que complementam os temas dos painéis. Parte da renda será destinada a bolsas do Educ para professores de escolas públicas. Entre no site do Educa Week e conheça a coleção toda. Lá você também pode garantir o seu certificado de participação. E mais uma grande novidade: a Educa Week preparou mais de 50 workshops voltados aos professores, aos gestores e para todos que se interessam por educação. Amplie horizontes e acelere sua carreira. Inscreva-se agora. Vagas limitadas. Bom, e ainda vale conhecer o espaço de troca de práticas e acompanhar o prêmio Destaque Educação, com propostas inspiradoras para suas aulas. Participe, vote! Tenha uma experiência completa na Educa Week. E-books, certificados, workshops, espaço de trocas de práticas e prêmio Destaque Educação. Você ajudando a transformar a educação no Brasil.
Eu acredito na educação porque a educação tem dado prova atrás de prova de que tudo no mundo pode parar, menos a educação. A educação não para.
O ato de educar é a maior revolução que pode existir, porque só a educação verdadeiramente consegue gerar oportunidade e enfrentar as desigualdades sociais.
Eu acredito na educação, acredito que a gente possa fazer diferença no mundo, acredito que com o nosso trabalho a gente supera. Vejam a potência desses professores e o que eles fizeram durante essa pandemia, se reinventando. E esses alunos maravilhosos que estão aqui há menos tempo nesse planeta e precisam muito da gente.
Educação não é só a construção do conhecimento, é também a construção das relações interpessoais. Por meio da educação, vidas são transformadas e sonhos são realizados.
Se hoje a gente nutre a esperança de voltar a se abraçar, voltar a conviver, abrir as portas da escola, movimentar a economia, a gente deve isso à educação, aos cientistas que descobriram uma vacina. Eu acredito no poder transformador da educação.
Nós, educadoras e educadores, nunca estamos sozinhos. O desafio que a pandemia nos impôs fez com que nós nos uníssemos ainda mais. É que a educação que nós acreditamos é um projeto coletivo. Eu acredito na educação.
Nós acreditamos na educação.
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos ao painel The Best Schools in Finland da Educa Week 2021. Este é um capítulo vivo da história da educação do Brasil. Reunimos mais de 150 lideranças do setor educacional para analisar e discutir a educação brasileira pós-pandemia. Você acompanha a Educa Week através do YouTube e em breve nos principais streamings de podcasts. A Educa Week é um oferecimento da SG Student Travel, provedora de experiências educacionais, Matific, plataforma de aprendizagem matemática, Educational Leaders, grupo de líderes educacionais do Brasil, e Educa, Institute of Technology and Education, a plataforma de educação digital que leva o mundo para dentro das escolas, e Árvore, a solução digital de leitura ideal para escolas públicas e privadas de todo o Brasil. E só reforçando, na página da Educa Week você pode adquirir o seu certificado e também lá você adquire os e-books complementares aos temas dos painéis e ainda se inscreve para mais de 50 workshops preparados pelos maiores profissionais do setor educacional, inclusive da professora Linda Natan, que abriu o painel hoje do The World High School Forum. Para dar início ao painel The Best Schools in Finland, gostaria de passar a fala para os mediadores desta conversa, Sr. Pasi Loman, presidente da Seppo, e Priscila Torres, Business Unit Head da Escola Concept do Grupo SEB. Sejam bem-vindos.
Muito obrigado, Marcos. É um grande prazer estar aqui na Educa Week novamente. O evento que vocês criaram é incrível, é um dos mais importantes eventos no calendário da educação, principalmente no setor particular aqui no Brasil. Então, muito obrigado. So I'm thanking Marcos Talarico, who's organizing Educa Week. It is really a great pleasure to participate. I want to already thank all the participants today. For those of you who don't know me, a very brief introduction. I'm Dr. Pasi Loman. I come from Finland too, but I actually moved away from Finland already in 1997. Moved to the UK. And while I was doing my doctorate there, my next door neighbor, literally, was a Brazilian woman. This neighbor became my girlfriend. She became my wife. And then together we moved to Brazil in 2006. So I've been already here for 15 years. And for the last 5 years or so, I've been working in the education sector, representing various foreign companies who want to enter the Brazilian market. Maybe I'm most famous for representing Seppo, which is a gamification platform, which is already now in use in all the Brazilian states. Literally thousands of games have been created by Brazilian teachers, coordinators, and educational publishers. But I also represent a couple of other companies, for example, a Tiny App, which is an amazing pedagogical assistant for early childhood education. It helps with lesson planning, pedagogical documentation, collaboration between families and schools. And also last but not least, a program called Kide Science, which is an amazing program that teaches science for kids starting from 3 years of age, using storytelling and play-based learning. It's a really amazing program, growing a lot in the world. And we actually have one of the co-founders together with us today, Jenni Vartiainen, who can talk more about this program. In Brazil, starting from next year, it's already going to be used in over 100 schools. But that's enough about me. It's now my great pleasure to welcome our second mediator from Grupo, Priscila Torres. Priscila, thank you for accepting the invitation to be with us today. Please join us and say a few words as an introduction, please.
Thank you so much, Pasi, and thank you, Educa Week, for this fabulous event. I am so pleased to be here this morning amongst so many of you and so curious to learn about what you guys have to share with regards to Finnish education and innovation and all the changes that are happening in the world of education today. Well, as Pasi has mentioned, I work for Grupo, and I am the business unit director for the group of schools called Concept Schools. Concept schools are a group of innovation schools, project-based learning schools that really are founded in the principles of the cultural forces, the cultures of thinking, habits of mind, and the relevant work in connection to the global goals. I have been working with education for the past 22 years, always with bilingual and international education. And I have had the pleasure and honor to start off Escola Concept São Paulo, which today is the flagship school for the concept schools altogether. So it is a great pleasure and honor to be amongst very knowledgeable educational leaders such as yourselves so that we can engage in conversation about trends in education. So Annika and Jan and Monica and Jenni, it will be such a pleasure to hear a few words from you as you introduce yourselves and a little bit about your trajectory. So thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Priscila. And maybe we could start with Annika Hätönen.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here in this event. I'm, as I say, I'm Annika Hätönen, Head of Pedagogy in Little Heroes International Kindergarten. We are located in Helsinki, Finland. We are now, this is our third year open. We opened in 2018. We are a really small kindergarten with our teaching language is in English, and we do have twice a week Mandarin Chinese play groups for children. And we do have a lot of STEM subjects here, and starting from 1 year old already, we are practicing bit by bit this STEM education. And I have been working in the field of education for almost 20 years now. I started as a school assistant when I was like 19, and I was really into this like education field. I love working with different kind of children, and when I was working in the public side kindergartens, I decided that I want to offer something more. I want to offer a high quality early childhood education for everybody. And actually, I met my business partner and the co-founder of the International Kindergarten, Jenni, while I was working in the public side. And then we decided to start up our own kindergarten. So that's like me in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you so much, Annika. Really interesting career path that you've had as well. So great to have you here. And maybe we could then move on. I'm looking at my Zoom screen here. Next up is Jan Nyberg.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. So my name is Jan Nyberg, and I'm a music teacher from Ylästö primary school, and it's located in Vantaa, near Helsinki, here in Finland. And I'm also a chairman of the board at the School Music Association Finland. And besides that, I also work as an entrepreneur in the field of music and social media. So it's like a mixed combination of like my biggest passions. And then I've been also teaching music for like 5 years now. And before that, I used to teach piano in a private music school. So that's me, quite in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us. And today we do indeed have a great variety of professionals from early childhood, basic education, and all the way up to higher education. And maybe for that reason, let's next bring up Jenni Vartiainen, who works in higher education. Jenni, you are in mute.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Great to be here today. My name is Jenni, and I work at the University of Helsinki. And there I teach the future kindergarten teachers. I'm also a researcher, and my study areas are young children's science education. So I'm very curious to understand in a more nuanced way how we can introduce science and math to young children so that we utilize play, and play in a sense that we take it as a dramatic play. We build play worlds with children where they can take roles of a little scientists, and I study how that affects children's science process skills learning, and of course how they find science more meaningful for themselves when they can approach it from play-based approaches. I'm also a founder of Kide Science. So Kide Science is based on my PhD research that I conducted for 5 years. And there we created that model of how we do play-based science education with young children. And eventually that became such a model that parents wanted their children to be able to learn that way, and also kindergarten teachers became very interested how we can also do science that way. So we decided to establish a company so that we can spread that model all over the world. And now Kide Science is in 30 countries, including Brasilia. And it's interesting to see how this model works in different parts of the world. So great to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Jenni. And now to make this link between Brazil and Finland, I would like to welcome Monica Lemos, who is a Brazilian educator based in Helsinki, Finland. Annika.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Pasi, for the invitation. Thank you, Educa Week, for the opportunity to share with you. So my name is Monica Lemos. I'm a pedagogical coordinator at Escola Castanheiras here in São Paulo. I'm actually in São Paulo. And but I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Helsinki.
That's
so
right.
Yeah. So I'm about to defend my PhD in January, I hope. And in my PhD, I work with educational management beyond school walls. I used the cultural historical activity theory developed by Professor Udo Engström, also from University of Helsinki. And I also work with play worlds, as Jenni Vartiainen mentioned that. I work also with Beth Fairholt and her whole team on play worlds and the development of play as a drama. So basically, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Priscila, would you like to set the ball rolling for our conversation today?
Absolutely. Wow. Such an interesting group of people with so many diverse backgrounds. And I'm sure that we will be very enriched by your experiences by the end of this talk. So I think the first question that we would like to start off with has to do with the situation in the world, right? This post, during still pandemic COVID-19 world. And our big curiosity here is, how did COVID-19 affect your schools, affect your education from your perspective with regards to your country and the work that you do? And what have been some of those effects with regards to teaching and learning practices that you have been able to observe? So if we can start off with you, Annika, we would love that question. We would love to hear from you with that question.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually now the situation is really good, and it feels that we are like almost back in normal situation. But the first, like the spring 2020, it was quite difficult because all the parents and all the families, they reacted in a different way. Some of them were really like scared and didn't know what was going to happen. And that spring, actually, there was only like 1 or 2 children in our kindergarten. So most of the families stayed home. But of course, not all of them could stay home if their parents' jobs wouldn't allow it. And we needed to lay off some staff in the few weeks at a time. And yeah, as I said, the situation was awful. But now, with the help of vaccinations and everything, it feels that it's going back to normal. And actually, this week we published our important dates of the rest of the year, and the parents were really happy. Oh, it feels like we're back in normal. Something is happening, and you can, allowed to do field trips and visit like museums and stuff. But during the pandemic, the spring 2020, we did our Mandarin Chinese lessons. Our Mandarin teacher, Leslie, did it actually remote, like through this actually Tiny app. We used, as Pasi mentioned about the Tiny app, we are using that, and it was really handy to share videos for parents to see with the children at home. And we also shared some like story time and music play groups and stuff like that to Tiny app. And we even tried this like remote class for those ones who were staying home. But of course, it's like, you never know with the children what's going to happen. So it's like even with the like under 3-year-olds group, it's like really hard to do this like remote class, but we made it through it.
Thank you, Annika. I actually want to ask you a follow-up question because, spring 2020 is the date that you bring up. And I believe that period of time was difficult for everybody, right, around the world. But the pandemic also brought a lot of teachings for all of us, right? So yeah. What stays after, because going back to normal, sometimes people have the idea that it's going back to how things were before spring 2020, but I'm not so sure that that's what it means. So what stays after, the pandemic in the world that we're living in now? How has the pandemic influenced these next chapters in the story, of Little Heroes and perhaps of kindergarten education in Finland?
Well, I'm sure that the most important that families are more aware of these like infections, and they are not bringing like sick children into daycare, because it used to be that it can be that in the morning we could see that the children are not well and we need to phone the parents, but now actually they are staying like more easily at home, so we haven't had that much of the infections, like any kind of like infections here. But I think more of like how we do things. Of course, we are more, particularly with the hygiene rules now, we are doing like everything that we can not to, get any like infections spreading here. But as teaching, I think it's more like that we do have the equipment to do this like remote classes too. And we are actually recording these like story times and music play schools like in advance, or we have some material already to share like online if the case would be again that we needed to do some like remote schooling or something.
Thank you so much. And Pasi, if you permit me, I would love to hear from Jan, because with his music background, it would be fascinating for all of us to hear what did that look like for you in spring 2020 and for your students in this reality, and then what stays right after this post-pandemic period.
Yes, thank you for the good question. Well, of course, when I teach music, the instruments are the main thing we do at the classroom. And if we think about the lockdown and studying remote, quite hard at first, I must say, but there were many good like technologies we could use for like bundle up things where you can play guitar or piano at home, for example, and things like that. But I think that it went really good after all. And if we think about this day, the use of mask is still mandatory. So the singing is a bit harder, I must say. And of course, the efforts are made to maintain safety distances whenever it's possible, also in the classrooms. And every age group is kept separated. And we haven't had any concerts for like one and a half year, but the first one is coming in a couple of months, and I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, then we'd have like different actions in different schools, for example, the use of different doors between different age groups and that kind of things. But I would say that the use of technology is one of the biggest things that came and changed like the whole teaching in a way. And the use of technology in music is maybe one of the biggest things that has come to stay.
Thank you, Jan. Back to you, Pasi.
Yeah, and I was very fascinated with the last words that Jan said, that it came to stay. So you really feel that you're going to continue using these tools even after the situation has calmed down and become kind of normal.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in Finland, we've always had the technology, but the use has been not so like big here in Finland. So I think the pandemic gave a good spark for the use and encouragement to use all the technology we have in the classroom. So I think it also had its good points.
Yeah, I think in many fields, including education, when we are used to doing things in a certain way, there's no impulse to change. Why change? Because things are going well. But then when the crisis comes, it forces you to do something else. And then you say, yeah, actually, this is good and this can be better than what we did before. And I would like to bring both Monica and Jenni, two researchers, into the discussion, because you may have a sort of a wider view of what happened in the entire country in Finland. Like here in Brazil, it's a massive country, big differences between the north and the south, even within cities, big socioeconomic differences. Was there anything like that in Finland, or did all the children at all age levels get by this period in the same way, or did you see some differences, and what were those differences if there were? Jenni, maybe you could start.
Thank you. Well, of course, always there are differences in families, how they go through this kind of exceptional times. And I think that mostly we have coped quite well in Finland, but of course there has been a lot of worry of some families where during the pandemic we haven't been able to, for example, contact some children while the schools were closed. And of course it has brought a lot of different kind of challenges to families. So it's not only closing the schools, but of course pandemic caused the situation where people lost their jobs, and there were a lot of fear that your loved ones might get infected, and we didn't know what that means. So a lot of worry, and that affects straight to children. But I think that it has been very good things that in Finland we have been able to keep quite much our schools and kindergartens open, so that there has been possibility for children to come to school and some regular structures still have been there, although, as Jan described, there are some restrictions and ways of working so that we can be sure that we are safe.
Yeah, may I jump in?
Yes, please, Monica.
Yeah. So I've been working as an English teacher for over 20 years. And in the past year, although it was very hard for all this issue, Jenni shared, on the other hand, English teachers historically have been in contact with technologies for various reasons. So it was hard. There were the contradictions, of course. I'm now focusing only on English teaching, which is my field, but somehow we could make things work. And although it's hard to work with language, and I had the opportunity to work with languages from early childhood up to high school during the pandemic. So it was quite challenging, especially to bring young kids to the screen to teach a foreign language, right? But I think, and this is something I learned during my stay in Finland, especially in the research group I take part of, which is devoted to cultural historical activity theory. We need to understand the crisis in order to develop tools to overcome it. It's not simple, of course, but I think when we go through the situations and we do good plannings, as this Finnish idea of planning, we can go through it, not smoothly because it wasn't easy, right? To go through many sick, we could have our relatives sick, the fear of losing our jobs. So it was indeed, it has been indeed a crisis. But I think when we go through it and develop tools to overcome it, technological or any kinds of other tools, it makes things at least clearer. And as Pasi mentioned in the beginning, we are a continental country. So in São Paulo and in private schools, I had the opportunity of working with my students through screen and through various kinds of platforms where they could develop, study by themselves as in asynchronous classes. They could have repositories of materials, but in other states, there were different situations. In the north, up north, for example, there were teachers going to different houses, giving the paperwork by boat. There were other teachers who were traveling by motorcycle to reach their students weekly and leave their work, the printing work, getting the printed material back so they could manually correct it. So there were various different situations and different ways teachers developed different tools all over the country to try to make education at least closer to students. And of course, many families needed the support of the kids. So many kids or young kids, I mean, not young kids, but teenagers left school so they could support their families in the work, selling things on streets or whatever kind of informal jobs. And people needed to go back to work, even though the COVID was still going on. So we are still, and I don't think we haven't got back to normal yet. I think we've been going through a new situation, which is going back to school, because now it seems there is this new upcoming, it's not bad. We can envision some future, I mean, of a new situation going on, but still we need to fix some things. So how to think over the hybrid education, because students are back and they are used to have technology, stronger use of technology, but they are not so used to interact to each other and to work collaboratively anymore. So we need to work with these two fronts and how to keep on with the technology we used to work during the pandemics and that gave us support to enhance education, and how to go back and teach kids how to relate to each other and to work collaboratively. So I think we are in this kind of double bind, right?
Absolutely. it's fascinating to hear what you guys have to say, because the through line that came up very clearly is the fact of being adaptable, right? The whole idea of what adaptability means, and then what adaptability means in the different circumstances and in the different lights that you guys shed to the problems that you faced during this time. So the adaptability and having that flexible mindset, right? Thinking flexibly and being open to that continuous learning throughout this process were key factors for that, so that all of you could succeed in your different fronts. So it's really fascinating to hear these stories, noticing where we converge and where we don't, right? So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Pasi, would you like to take the next question?
Yeah, and I think that point that you brought up, the adaptability and retraining, probably is one of the reasons why my understanding is that Finland dealt well during the pandemic compared to many other countries, is the teacher training and the great level of autonomy that the teachers have in Finland. So they are already, even before the pandemic, used to planning their own lessons, thinking about which methodology to use. So I think that's I would like to actually go into this issue of teacher training. What's that like in Finland for our Brazilian people who are watching and listening? Would be interesting to know what is the teacher training like in Finland. I think it's a little bit different from Brazil. So maybe we start again from Annika, and then we go through all our guests.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm sure that actually Jenni with the, because she is like educating now in university, is the teacher could answer better. But well, my background is that I'm Bachelor of Social Studies. So it used to be that you could teach, you could study to be a bachelor in education in university and get the easy teachers qualification. But then other way was that you studied to be Bachelor of Social Studies with the easy program. And actually my background is in the social studies. But the thing is that,
just to sorry to interrupt, just to help out people who are listening, ECE, you mean early childhood?
Early childhood education and care. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And it is really good, the education system in Finland. And as you said, that the teachers do our planning ourselves. Of course, our curriculum and everything is based on the national curriculum, Finnish national curriculum of early childhood education and care. But as we were talking about the pandemic, it wasn't that, it would, as you said that because the teachers are doing the planning themselves, it is, as I noticed with my own children who were back then, whereas in the 2nd grade and the 6th grade, it was total differences also, because a lot of these technological skills that teacher might have or might not have, it actually varied a lot. And there was with my 6th grader's son, he got all the remote schooling and everything worked properly. But then of course the 2nd graders, the teacher wasn't that, she didn't know how to use the technology that much. So they actually used a lot of these regular phone calls, with of course it doesn't work that well with the small kids. But yeah, the teacher training, and I think more of I think the university size, because nowadays you can get this early childhood education teachers qualification only from the university, and you study for 3 to 4 years. And I think Jenni can tell more about the actual education there.
Actually, Annika, since we have you, I think that it would be great for us to understand with regards to professional development, because I do think Jenni would do a fabulous job talking to us about her specialty, which is training kindergarten teachers, future kindergarten teachers. However, after those teachers are trained, And after they find jobs and after they come work at your school, how do you continue to develop them inside that school environment through professional development opportunities? What would that look like?
Well, yeah, the truth is that you can't learn everything in school. You are right in that. So actually you learn by doing, and of course it helps if you have like a more experienced colleague. But actually kindergarten managers here, they actually do this like pedagogical management. So they do guide teachers quite a lot, like throughout the year and with the planning, and check that all the pedagogical material are in the plans and in their like daily lives. So yeah, and actually in our school we do have our own like system how we do things, because our teaching language is English, but most of the kids that are going to our kindergarten is like from the Finnish families. So we do teach English as a second language to children. So we do have our own like methods at how we teach the language to children. So we start when the new teacher comes to our kindergarten, we start to coach her and guide her through, and usually it takes maybe like the first 6 months to learn things, and then teachers are able to do their own planning and everything.
With regards to that, as at continuing this curiosity, I'll use Escola concept for example. At Escola concept here in Brazil, obviously we hire really talented, very qualified, highly qualified, experienced educators. However, we believe in continuous development. So every week, our educators will engage in 2.5 hours of additional learning opportunities, be it with their specific principals or coordinators or colleagues, or be it with study groups that they develop. So I was wondering, is there something similar in your school or in schools in Finland with regards to the continuous development of teachers within the school environment? Or is it more of just the checks and balances of the day-to-day of the coordinators working with the teachers?
Well, of course, we do have like this ongoing like education development system, and actually a lot of like Helsinki city actually gives out a lot of opportunities to participate different kind of like courses and lessons about like different things, and they are usually maybe 2 times a month. But we do have our own pedagogical team here. Usually it's like every other week that we do this like pedagogical thing, just to do the like cooperation with difference between the groups, and just like check that all the right kind of like pedagogical learning is going on in the groups.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I imagine that you mentioned that in your school you use the Tiny App solution that helps with the pedagogical documentation, and I imagine that helps in the long-term planning, that you see which skills have already been taught and what areas of knowledge should be focused in the next week or the next term. Is my assumption correct, Annika?
Yeah, that's true. Tiny App is really handy to follow, and it's a really handy tool for this like pedagogical documentation that we do here, and it's like actually a part of this like Finnish national early childhood education curriculum. There is like that we do need to follow, do the pedagogical documentation, and Tiny App is a perfect tool for that.
Nice. And Jenni, could you tell a little bit more about when a student enters into a university to study pedagogy? Is it super theoretical? Do you follow a certain methodologies throughout the time at the university, or how does it go? Or how does it look like?
Well, teacher education in Finland, it's always research-based education. So everything that we do is based on understanding what skills in the future children should master, what are the qualities that a good teacher should have. And it's very important that everyone who teaches at the university does research also. So everyone at the University of Helsinki, for example, they teach and they do research. And that makes sure that we have the latest understanding what's going on in the research field. So of course, we do look a lot at early childhood education curriculum, for example, but we don't teach exactly kind of how to follow a curriculum, but we teach how to interpret curriculum and look beyond it. So it's very important that we all the time think about what will be the needs we have tomorrow. So that comes, for example, together here in the situation with pandemic, for example. And another thing that we should all the time keep in mind is the eco-catastrophe that is about to affect all of our lives. So we really need now to focus on eco-social thinking, for example, in teacher training. And all the time, at least I emphasize in my teaching that teachers should be the change makers. So that teacher has the huge power to affect what kind of societies we will one day have. So rather than going to the field and repeating things that has always been done, we want to kind of create teachers who have courage and capabilities of change the ways we have always acted. And it comes well together, for example, this how we utilize technology in different levels of education. So we want to have critically thinking teachers who see possibilities, for example, in technology, but who also see how it affects to different kind of factors. So that critical thinkers is one of the main word, I would say, when we talk about what kind of teachers we try to educate through our teacher training. And also one point of view that I think is very important is that we would like to see our students, future teachers, as a part of our research community, so that we don't want to see them as students, as our clients, but we want to see them as a part of community, so that we listen to them now when they are students at the university, but after they graduate, after they go to the field, they still are part of this academic community. And it's very important to keep communication channels open so that we could also understand what happens there in the kindergartens and schools. And when I say that we are kind of research-based university and training is research-based, it's also that all kindergarten teachers in Finland are at least bachelor level, and all elementary school teachers are master level. So they have conducted the research also by themselves. And it's very important that we try to give future teachers also skills to interpret the research papers, research data, what they meet, and so that they have capability to train themselves further so that they can follow maybe the research also that is produced. So main keywords are research-based. Of course, a lot of practice with children too, but always that idea how we root everything to what we understand now. Critical thinkers and change makers of the future.
Excellent. And as you said, at basic education, everybody has to have at least a master's degree, and that's in actually pedagogy. They have to study that. For example, 5-6 years ago, for a short while, I was thinking about maybe going back to Finland, and I considered maybe I could work as a teacher. In many other countries, like in Brazil, somebody like me who has a doctorate, I could do a 7-month or 1 year course, a teacher training course, and then be able to teach at the school. But I contacted some people in Finland, and they said, no, if you want to teach at a primary or secondary school in Finland, you need to go back to university, 5 years of study. There's no shortcuts. Your doctorate for this doesn't help at all, because my doctorate is in ancient history. I could teach at the university, yes, but to go to school, I need those skills that the teachers who have gone through teacher training have. There's no shortcut. The profession is so highly valued. Jan, is there something when you specialize as for a music teacher, for example, what kind of routes do you need to take in that?
Yeah, so I studied at the University of Arts, Helsinki, and my training took also 5.5 years. So it's 3 years the bachelor's degree and then 2.5 years the master's degree. And as I said, I studied music education as my main subject, and our studies were like mainly practice oriented, because we needed to learn how to play all the band instruments, how to make composers, how to conduct an orchestra, school orchestra, and so on. So it was quite a lot like practice oriented, but of course, like Jenni said, we also, the base of the studies is always the latest research, and we also did research at our studies also. So I have a Master of Music degree with pedagogic competence, and the regular class teachers, they have the Master of Education degree. So the content of the studies is slightly different, but we still have the same competence for the teaching. Yeah, so it's a bit different, but still the same.
And Monica, coming from outside, but studying at the
outside and inside.
Yes.
I'd like to compliment, and then maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think teaching education in Finland is very much connected with the word praxis as well, because as Jenni mentioned, it's a lot of research based, but it has also to do with the practice. So I could follow a little bit this pre-service and in-service, like mixing. Teachers are, during the process, they also go to schools, at prep schools. So they are studying the theory at the university, but they are also in loco, in schools like the Vicky prep school, where teachers go and they work with students and they have a mentor who follow their teaching education process, not only through their readings, because when we talk about research in Brazil, it can be very much connected to theory and to how researchers, articles, reading, and lots of documents and theory. But in my experience in Finland, I could notice that teachers need to be in loco, teachers need to be involved with students, preparing classes, getting connected to the curricula, and really teaching. It's not a training program where the students can go and observe classes and observe only how things work, but pre-service, and that's why I say it's a mix of pre and in-service, because they are in pre-service, but they are already in schools and teaching and working, and they have this mentor who is an experienced teacher, very much connected with research in university. So it's like a bridge. It's a person who is experienced in both school and university, who guides this teacher to build their own path. And then that's where the word agency, or the term agency, comes up very strongly, because from the roots in university and in this combination between university and prep schools, teachers get afforded to be their own developers or changers, as Jenni mentioned. So it's not necessary to have a pedagogical coordinator, as we have this figure. I know I am a pedagogical coordinator, but as we have this figure of the pedagogical coordinator, that's no need for that. because throughout their educational process, the teacher's educational process, they had already instruments or experiences that guide their own formation all over their pathway in their career. So that's something that calls my attention when thinking over teacher training in Finland.
Wow, that's really fascinating to hear so many nuances, right, when it comes to teacher training. And what does that look like, right, in the different realities that we live? I know that in Finland, you guys receive a lot of credit for the way that your educational system is set up when preparing educators to go into schools. As Pasi said, he has a doctorate and he would have to restart his whole training if he had this aspiration of working in schools. And that's really fascinating, because it really shows the commitment that the Finnish people have to the process that has been set up with regards to teacher education. So really fascinating to learn that. With regards to, and following that same line of thinking, but with regards to personalization of learning, that has been a really hot topic, especially during this pandemic world, and the things that we all went through with regards to teaching and learning practices, and how to deliver what learners really need with regards to where they are in their learning journey. And throughout this, I'll say from spring 2020 until the recent days, it became more apparent, right, for everybody, that learners really have diverse needs, and they really need to be seen as individuals within this context. So I'd be really curious to hear a little bit more about this personalization of learning and what that means in the reality that you guys live in with regards to the work that you do. So Annika, if you can start us off talking to us about personalization of learning from the student perspective, and from the teacher's perspective, and from the leadership perspective within Little Heroes.
Sure, thank you. Well, actually, the personalized early childhood education plan has been used in kindergartens already from the 90s. But I think more and more about, as you said, that the growing trend is that you concentrate on the strength and the interest of the children. And of course, it's hard for the teacher if you think the levels that we need to base our curriculum for. First, the Finnish national curriculum, and then every city has their own, and then every kindergarten follows those. Plus, the main thing is that we do twice a year, we update every children's easy plan with the cooperating with their parents, and all those strengths and interests and needs of every individual child is affects how we do our day-to-day planning. So it's quite a puzzle, I say, and but it's manageable, because if you think that there's in over three-year-old children's group, there is one adult per 7 children. So you do have, if you have the maximum amount in one group of the children is 21, but you have 3 adults there to observe and be really sensitive of it. Maybe some of the children can't say what they are interested or say what they need. So you need to actually adults need to be really sensitive of observing and noticing of every need of every children. And for example, if we notice that some children need practice in agility, then we plan our gym classes that we can practice those skills, or mathematical skills. Then we practice that. We divide those 21 kids, we divide in smaller groups, and one adult is teaching these children need this kind of practice. They are doing this kind of exercises and play board games and stuff like that. And as we do talk about a lot about this, like participating children. Of course, it doesn't mean that, you know, they can decide whatever they want to do. It's more about like we have actually with older kids, we do have these like children's meetings that we do ask the children that what are you interested about? For example, in the autumn time, what would you like to do in this period? That because we have actually split our like annual calendar in these like 5 different periods that have like these different topics. For example, it is like one topic is like animals and environment. So start of every period, we do have this like children's meeting, and children tell what they think about, you know, the subject and what, you know, interests them and what would they want to do. And then the teachers and the older adults like take those initiatives and then like fuse it into the day planning. And of course, you know, for example, Christmas parties, children, we can like vote that, you know, what songs that do we want to take in the Christmas party. So we do participate a lot of like children into the planning too. And of course, the important thing is to like after the period to have this like evaluation that we do ask children's opinion, that how did you like this period, what was your favorite thing, and all that knowledge we of course like take into account when we are planning the next period and the next thing.
Thank you. Well, that's fascinating because we can hear that student voice and choice come really strongly with the teaching and learning practices that you've just described, right? Which is really connected to differentiated instruction and, you know, all the research that has been done behind that. So with that, Jenni, I would be really curious to hear, what does that personalization of learning, what does the teaching of that look like from your perspective when you are preparing these kindergarten teachers to go out into schools? How do you approach the topic of personalization of learning?
Well, first of all, of course, we have to figure out what we think about a child, what child is as a learner. So sometimes we can see that there are images of a child that child is an incomplete adult. And we need to train children certain skills and knowledge to become a fully developed adult. But that's something we don't want to keep on in Finland. So how we see a child is that child already is a complete person with skills that they have at the moment, with interest they have. And children also have quite clear images in their minds, what they want and what they want to learn, for example. And as Annika described, it's very important that we hear children when we are starting to planning what we do with children, and appreciate children as whole, complete persons. And they have capabilities to do decisions concerning about themselves. And I think that it starts in teacher training about these ideas of how we want to see a child and how we want to see a child as a learning person. And one thing also is that sometimes personalized learning is a bit misinterpreted. So sometimes you might hear that it's taken as something that we create like individual paths for children where they go on their own as far as they ever can. Of course, it's extremely important that we take into consideration children's needs, their different stages of development, where they are, and what kind of support and help they need. But I still emphasize the role of social learning, in a sense that learning is always a social process. And to create a future where we really help each other, we cooperate, and we solve different difficult problems together, we need already from the early on that kind of approach that we help each other to learn, and we create little communities where that learning happens, so that every child is part of that learning community. And I find it extremely important that we don't support individualism in a sense, but we also think about, if we take, for example, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, other children can help children to develop. So it's not always a teacher who push children beyond the phases that they are at the moment, but we can create the learning environments, the situations where children learn lots from each other.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing, Pasi. As I'm hearing Jenni speak, it is so important, right, for us to differentiate as educators the difference between individualized learning programs and personalized learning programs. And I think that is really something that sometimes people can get confused by what those two terms mean. So I really appreciated the fact that you highlighted that during the answering of this question, because it's important that as educators, when we are leading education, or when we are in the classroom and we're in the front, that we understand, right, what those differences are, and that yes, we are listening to the learners and to the individuals, and yes, we are creating those environments, and the environment is being used as that third educator within that space. So it's fascinating. Thank you so much, Jenni, and apologies, Pasi. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
All right, fascinating discussion. Thanks for that. Maybe I would take this to Jan, and a little bit continuing from this individual or personalized learning. One of the questions that I get as a Finnish educator here in Brazil all the time is that, well, what's the methodology that Finland uses? Why is it so successful? So is there one certain methodology that at your school, for example, Jan, you follow? Is it play-based learning, gamification, or certain famous pedagogue that has come up with a theory? Do you follow a certain path, or is it a mix of various things? Jan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pasi. I think it's kind of a mixture. As a music teacher, mostly we learn by doing. So we play different instruments, and the theory comes mostly like after that. Hey, we play this C major scale, and then we get to know the scale after we have played. So learning by doing is really upfront what comes to music education. And I think what I like as a teacher, what Jenni and Annika also said, that the first thing and the biggest thing is to learn the students, get to know the students and what they can and what are the best ways to reach the goals that the curriculum has set. And the goals can be achieved by using different learning methods and different ways of learning. So the key is getting to know the students, and that's how you learn to know which method suits best for each student also. So the goal is always the same, but there can be different paths and different options for the students to choose for the work they do. For example, if they work as a group, or some people like to work individually to reach the same goal. So there are plenty of options to choose from there. But I think it also varies whether you teach history or music. I think there are some kind of differences also.
Your answer already gives me a clear idea. Why is it necessary for students to study 5 years at the university? Because you need to know all these different methodologies, all these different tools, so that you can then choose what's appropriate for this group, for these individuals. So you need the time for all that.
Yes, and of course, I must say that the biggest things I have learned when I've been teaching, because every day you learn something new and you get new ways to put the theory into the practice also.
That's right. And Jenni, in your research and then what you've been putting in practice with Kide Science that you co-founded, the play-based learning is a really strong part. So could you talk a little bit about why is that such a powerful way of teaching, please?
Yes, sure. It's my favorite topic. Well, play is a leading activity for young children. So they learn everything by playing. They learn everyday skills, they learn social skills, and we can take the aspects of play and help children learn also, for example, science and math, so that we create a play-based learning environment around that. And when we look at research literature around play-based learning, it's defined very different way in different researches. And sometimes it might be narrowed as something that we just use, for example, children's toys to learn classification. So it's a very narrow way to understand play. And at the other end, we can understand play as this kind of play environment where we really dive into that imaginary situation, where even teachers have roles they play during that play setting. And in Kide Science, we follow that dramatic play world's idea of how we utilize play in early science education. And the base for the idea is that we trigger that playful situation by utilizing stories and different kind of props that children use. So this kind of little marks that tell children that now they are going to step into the play world and they are transforming into little scientists. And according to my own research, we have seen that taking this playful role, it pushes children to the next level. They can very well use their critical thinking skills. They can use different kind of science process skills where they co-create meanings and they solve the problems together. So it gives the idea that when they are in the role of a scientist, they start acting as they think scientists do. It's exactly the similar case when children are playing, for example, firefighters. So if they play firefighters, they start acting as they think that firefighters act. And important thing is that when children are in a playful role, they are not exactly playing the role, but they are that person, for example, scientists. They don't pretend to be scientists, but they really are scientists in their minds. And it opens up the huge possibilities to teach children even a bit of these academic kind of skills, but do it in a way that children don't even realize that they are, in fact, learning quite much about science and science process skills because they just think that they are playing scientist. And it brings a lot of positive emotions. It supports children's self-image as a learner, someone who can produce knowledge by themselves. Of course, teacher is carefully scaffolding every single step there, so children are not left alone, just play scientist. But teachers do that through stories and through participating in the play. So it's fascinating, very delicate process that teachers are doing when they scaffold children through this play world of science.
Brilliant, really, really interesting. And I think Annika mentioned that at their kindergarten, Little Heroes, they start teaching science already from 1 year of age. Super interesting. And I've learned that there's so many benefits. You learn other skills and abilities through that. So that's really interesting. You also mentioned, Jenni, about the emotions. So I think I would like to bring, if Priscila, you may, to our next question about student well-being. How is that seen at all levels of education, from early childhood education, basic education, of higher education, how important is
Pasi, I'm sorry. Before going to the next question, can I talk a little bit about personalization? I was intrigued about the topic. I would like to go back a bit to what Jenni was telling about. And I think there are two key words in the Finnish educational system, especially the päiväkoti, the child care, right? Choice and responsibility. I think since young learners, they learn how to make choices when they get into schools, and in many cases, they need to like organize their days and choose what somehow they are going to work on, and they become responsible for that choice. And also they are responsible not only for their own care and educational processes, we are tightly connected, but they are also responsible. And I think that's why the social learning that Jenni mentioned is so important, because they are also responsible for the others. Like the big ones need to help the smaller ones during their feeding times, during their changing times, sometimes in the playing moments. So those are features that are quite important for personalization, especially to break this line of individualism, right? Because they're learning how to make choices, they are responsible for their choices, and they are also responsible for their space or their friends, and also responsible for their learning, this learning moments they have. And I'm talking from the päiväkoti or the child care. So thank you. And sorry for jumping in, but I was like,
excellent.
I would like to talk about the personalization topic.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I'm sure everybody appreciated to hear that comment. Thanks for that. So I was moving on to, Priscila, do you want to add something as well, please?
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make a connection here before we continue to going on to well-being, just with regards to what Jenni was mentioning, which connected to the teaching of science. I myself was a science teacher for multiple years, so that's where my background lies. So I'm fascinated by this topic. And it was so interesting, something that happened this week. We had the Nobel Prize winner, right, for medicine was announced on Monday. And on Tuesday, our learners at Escola Concept were able to participate in a live interview with Dr. Julius David, in this context of, the Nobel Prize, and being it so that the Nobel Prize, the winner was not the person who created the vaccine for COVID, right? But it was in the midst of a pandemic, for the surprise of everybody, it connected to touch and senses, right? In a time period where those senses were inhibited, right? Because of the situation that we were living. So very fascinating conversation. And one of the things that he brought up while he was talking to the learners was this whole idea behind curiosity. And he made it very, very simple. And he said, to win the Nobel Prize, obviously, he was oversimplifying it, but he said to win the Nobel Prize, it all started with curiosity. And it all started with being curious back in grade school, right? When I was in high school, I was curious and I asked questions, and the questions led to more questions. And this whole principle of curiosity, was something that he focused deeply on. And for us, right, it might seem obvious, perhaps, us being in the positions that we're in and with the experiences that we have. However, when we transfer that to the educators that are being prepared to take on those roles as educators in the classroom, and when we transfer that to the learners that are participating in these learning environments, it's not that obvious. So I just wanted to dig in a little bit more, Jenni, if possible, if you could bring that to light with regards to curiosity, and how do we bring that topic in to the study of science in preparation of these new educators that are coming to be part of our schools? So if you can talk a little bit about that, I would love to hear from you.
As you said, the curiosity and ability to ask questions is a prerequisite for learning, and it's prerequisite for lifelong learning. And we really want to support that young children's natural tendency to ask questions. Young children are masters of asking questions, so we have a lot to learn from them. And okay, now I refer back to some studies. Young child, let's say around 3 to 5 years old, they might ask even 107 questions per 1 hour on the average. When we look at first and second graders, 7 to 8 years old, they ask on the average 5 to 6 questions per 1 hour. And when we look at 5th to 6th graders, so 11 to 12 years old, there might be periods of hours where none of the questions are asked. So of course, we can critically evaluate these numbers, but what we see is that the tendency to ask questions, it dramatically reduces when children grow older. So there is something we should do to maintain that natural curiosity of children. And reasons behind why they stop asking questions, it's not simple. It's a very complex phenomenon. And of course, there are, for example, the idea that children's inner speech start to develop so they don't blurb everything out that comes to their mind. That's for sure one thing. But why they are not saying questions and wonderings aloud, that comes back to idea of how we think about questions in a social manner. What is the social status of questions? If you ask a question, does that tell that you don't know, your lack of knowledge? Or does it tell that you are curious and you want to know more and you want to find ways to understand something in a deeper level? So first of all, I think it's very important to appreciate young children's questions. And if we can show children how much we appreciate their questions, that we even take their questions as a starting point for what we do, I think we have possibilities to raise the status of questions higher. So that comes together with the idea that we use children's interest as a starting point when we start developing pedagogy in early childhood education and later in school as well. So it's one important step towards the idea that questions are good and being curious is a good thing. But we can see it quite often that it might happen when a 3-year-old who asks these hundreds of questions per day, that adults get exhausted, like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I know I have been working with young kids. I have 2 children of my own that even I have met myself in a situation where I say just that, no more questions, please. It's time to go to the bed. But the idea that in general, we should try to appreciate children's questions. We can't answer all of those. And in fact, it's good that if adults don't even try to answer children's questions. Sometimes it's quite interesting when a child asks a question is to ask back, what do you think? What is your theory? And quite often children have amazingly cultivated ideas behind their question. And when children answer you back, it offers you great possibilities to start solving with the children. What is the answer? How could we find out? So it teaches also children the process of finding out. It's not so that we should be walking Wikipedias and try to answer every single question, but that attitude, we can find this out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that beautiful, inspirational answer as well. Thank you.
And that was amazing. Thank you so much. So we were talking about the student well-being. all this methodology, all this teacher training, it's important that students will be prepared when they go into working life or continue their studies. So the academic success is important. But how is student well-being seen in Finland? Is that something that is being given more focus, or is the aim really just to get high grades and do well in the PISA rankings? What's the most important thing? What's the balance in Finland at the moment? Maybe Jan could start this time.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think there are many structures in elementary school that support really much student well-being. For example, we have a school curator and a school psychologist, and also, of course, a school nurse who all work closely with the students all the time. And then at our school, we also have a community well-being group that plans issues related to student well-being, such as various events for the students and different kind of activities. And pupils are also involved in influencing their own school life, which is really important. For example, through the student body organizations and so on. And of course, if the situation needs to be that kind of things, we also have, like, the school also works closely with other professionals in the field of well-being, as child protection and authority and so on. So there are many structures in elementary school which are supporting the well-being of the students. And I think to have all that, it also like makes teachers to get to focus more to the teaching, and then we have help if needed around us.
And what's the situation and at higher education and early childhood education? Monica, you're studying at the Finnish University. Have you come across these issues?
Yeah, I think the university gives a strong support to the students' well-being as well, especially when we are under pressure of going through a PhD and choosing the best career and finalizing it, or going through papers. All this pressure process that we go through during the PhD, there is strong support, psychological support. I think the university community is also very strong. I mean, the different research groups, people can find support in each other and in the supervisors as well, right? And back to childhood, at least in my experience, it seems that as care and education are so tightly walking together. When we think of care and like well-being as this unit, care and education as this unit, the well-being of the student is mainly taken into consideration. And as Jan mentioned, there is a strong participation of kids, and there is also a strong participation of parents, not intervening in educational process, but acting together in somehow decision-making and giving some kind of background support to the whole educational process in early childhood education.
Annika, is that your experience as well?
Yes, well, actually, if you think of the term easy, which comes like early childhood education and care, and there is the care word that means that, you know, in the center of everything that we do in early childhood education is the learning and well-being child, and that the well-being of the children is always, of course, comes first. And we guarantee that because we are doing tightly cooperation with the parents. And of course, there's a lot of legislation, like laws that guarantee that we follow the rights of the children, and we follow right kind of way of doing things that we guarantee the wholesome development of the child. And we do actually teach the children in early childhood education. We do teach the children self-care too, how to, you know, dress up themselves, how to feed themselves, what is like healthy food, healthy nourishment that you should use. They need to we practice to think like every morning we see how's the weather, we think what kind of like, you know, equipment we need outside. Do we need rain gears? Is it like snowing? Do we need winter coats? And we teach the children of self-care too, to do, you know, guarantee their own like well-being too. But otherwise, yeah, it starts from very young age and, you know, continuing until, and of course we do have like professional, like if somebody, for example, needs any kind of like therapy or like speech therapist or healthcare, we do a lot of cooperation with the healthcare centers, with this like children healthcare center. And so we do think that, you know, it's like wholesome education that and care that we do here.
Can I add here one viewpoint on well-being? So in addition to all these great views that Jan and Annika and Monica have brought out, I think one important factor in Finland connected to well-being is also our assessment policies and how we do assessment, especially in the early childhood. So we don't have tests, we don't have rankings for children. So we don't want to get children stressed about their learning results and such things. And I think that also it's extremely good thing that in school, we have more and more formative assessments all the time. So the idea that we assess, does children reach the goals while the learning is going on, not at the end of the learning period. So we can then see where children need help, what kind of help they need, and help children to reach those goals. And we all know all the time where children are going. And it's so important that in Finland we don't have any kind of rankings when it comes to children, not in early childhood education, not in schools. Our first test that put people in some kind of rank is matriculation examination at the end of the high school. So until that, there are no this kind of ranking processes, and it produces a lot of well-being.
Thank you for that, Jenni. We have 5 minutes left. Priscila, would you like to wrap things up?
Absolutely. Wow, what a pleasure. This has been such an enlightening morning for me. So it's a great way to start off my day, to be inspired by all the things that have been shared here. But there was so much that was shared. And sometimes when we think about all of this and other people are listening to, to this great talk, they tend to wonder, like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? There's so much to think about. So what I would like to ask from each and every one of you is, if you can say, if you had like one takeaway, if you had one thing that you would want those who are listening to us to take away with them, what would that one thing be with regards to, any of the topics that we explored today? Anything that has to do with curiosity and science and well-being and methodology and post-COVID, anything that you feel like that is the gem that I want you to take away from me. And I want to start out by provoking Monica, who is, in the same country that we're in, and we can follow the order from there. We can go Monica, Jan, Annika, and then we'll close with Jenni.
Well, too much, but let's try it. I think I'll finish as I started. I think we need to understand the crisis we go through to develop tools that are according to somehow to overcome this crisis and envision new possibilities or better possibilities for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan?
Yes, thanks for the question. I would say maybe the certain kind of freedom the students take care of their own learning, to give the spark for the studies they are doing, and exploring things also themselves with the teacher, as Jenni beautifully said.
Thank you. Annika?
Well, I think if you want to teach a child a skill or any kind of like educational thing, I think the best and most effective way is to teach by play-based learning, through play. And that starts from the child's own interest and strength.
Thank you. And Jenni, you get to take us home. You get to close.
Yay. Raise the change makers. No matter if it's early childhood education, is it elementary school, high school, or is it university? Raise the change makers who have creativity and ability to think critically. That is the way we can solve any kind of problems the future will bring us.
Thank you. Wow. There's a lot of gems to take home today. So I really want to thank you all for this amazing opportunity to listen and to learn during this hour and a half that we spent together. Pasi?
Wonderful. It was really inspiring for me as well. And thank you so much for your participation, Priscila. You added a lot to this discussion. As a Finn living here in Brazil, I really enjoy having this connection. Two countries widely different, but there are some connections as well. And in education, we are approaching leading schools like concept. We already use a lot of the things that they use in Finland as well. But we can also learn from Brazil, bring some things to Finland. So these kind of opportunities are always super valuable. So thanks for everyone who took part. Thanks for everyone who listened. Thanks again to Educa Week, Marcus and all the team. It's been a great pleasure, and see you later in other events. Bye-bye.
Participar da Educa Week é expandir os horizontes e você pode ampliar ainda mais esta aprendizagem. Adquira os e-books da coleção Educa Week, que complementam os temas dos painéis. Parte da renda será destinada a bolsas do Educa para professores de escolas públicas. Entre no site do Educa Week e conheça a coleção toda. Lá você também pode garantir o seu certificado de participação. E mais uma grande novidade: a Educa Week preparou mais de 50 workshops voltados aos professores, aos gestores e para todos que se interessam por educação. Amplie horizontes e acelere sua carreira. Inscreva-se agora. Vagas limitadas. Bom, e ainda vale conhecer o espaço de troca de práticas e acompanhar o prêmio Destaque Educação, com propostas inspiradoras para suas aulas. Participe, vote. Tenha uma experiência completa na Educa Week. E-books, certificados, workshops, espaço de trocas de práticas e prêmio Destaque Educação. Você ajudando a transformar a educação no Brasil.